and we can get started. Okay, so, well, can you all hear me okay, first of all?
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Yes. I'm really glad you decided to join this taster session for Write Your Soul Story. Just the whole idea is this will start you off on a journey and give you a flavour of what the full course is like. But before we start, a couple of housekeeping bits and pieces. If you don't mind, can I ask you to mute yourself during the first part of this, during the main presentation? We're going to have time at the end for discussion and questions. And if you have any problems hearing me throughout this, please unmute and tell me, because unfortunately, I can't actually see the chat while I'm presenting, which is a bit frustrating. So if you can just unmute yourself and say, hello, Kate, I'm having problems hearing you. So let's get started. This course is designed to help you write about your experiences of God, or to tell the story of your soul's journey, or what I like to call your soul story. And to do this in the form of an autobiography or memoir. Now, I suspect that people may be at very different stages of their thinking about this. For you, it might be a vague idea that you just like to explore a bit further. For some of you, I know quite a number of people have found this time of enforced retreat, forced on us by COVID-19, has got people finally thinking about writing that book they all said they would. And you may have very different writing experiences. You may have written no more than a school essay, or you may be a more experienced writer. As I get to know you, hopefully I'll find out more about this. You may be writing as part of your work, or you may even have written a book before, but now want to explore what God is calling you to share with others about your journey with him. Now, the idea for this course actually came to me during the first lockdown, when a number of people started to approach me saying that they wanted to write a book about their walk with God, and could I help them? I think it was this matter of people finally finding the time to do this. The problem is, however, is that most people just don't seem to know where to start. And I can remember feeling completely at sea when I began this whole process. And because of this, I think very often kind of most wonderful stories never actually get beyond being an idea or an impulse, which is a tragedy, because there are so many incredible stories out there that need to be told, which I think can really encourage people and can inspire them. So if this is you, then this is definitely the course for you. Now, the thinking behind this course is based upon my own experience and my calling from God, and it covers all the things that I wish I'd known about when I started off as a writer. It's about the various stages of the book, from writing, pinning down who you're writing for, to structuring, to storyboarding your story, and also writing in a way that really engages readers, right the way through to the editing and finding a publisher and even promoting your book. Now, I never expected to be a published author. Up until a few years ago, I was far too busy working, bringing up a family, to even consider trying to put pen to paper. But you never know what's around the corner and how God can work in your life. And in 2014, I was having a great time working with the Christian aid agency, World Vision. I was running their global communications. And I was running around the world, spending 1 week in Asia, the next in Africa, meeting some amazingly inspirational people, when to my shock, I was diagnosed with advanced breast cancer. Now, suddenly, there we are, there's me, minus the hair. Suddenly, my world shrunk. And one moment I was getting on and off planes like buses, and the next I was basically in isolation, because as the chemotherapy caused my immune system to collapse, I was unable even to see my own family. And so after years of frantic activity, I was finally forced to be still and to know that he is God. And having been brought to a standstill, I began to look back over my life. And for the first time, I really began to see how God had always been there, how his unseen hand had kind of guided my trajectory, and how he lifted me up even in the darkest moments. And when I was ill, I kept on being given this passage from Psalm 118:17. I will not die, but will live and declare the works of the Lord. And this scripture came to me like a life raft in a stormy sea, and I clung onto it for dear life. But I also realized in this passage, I recognized the call to share my experience of God, to record how he had worked in my life. And so in the midst of my illness, I began to write an account of my faith journey. Initially, I wrote the story as a legacy for my family. I really wanted my children to know how the depth of my faith and how close I felt to God, even in those circumstances when I could be potentially leaving them. I never dreamt it'd be published. I thought I might print it out and ring bind it for my kids. But then God did something amazing in my life, and my writing efforts became about something much bigger. And I began to see how telling my story, through this, I could begin to provide reassurance to those who maybe felt they'd been looking for God in all the wrong places, or maybe had struggled to find him in the midst of adversity. And the resulting book, Sea Change, was published by Christian publisher Authentic Media in 2016, to my delight. It's now an Eden best-selling biography and was even nominated as Christian Biography of the Year in 2017. And suddenly I was reaching an audience far beyond my family. In fact, only the other day I was told that apparently, bizarrely, it's very popular in Myanmar of all places. But I felt this is proof that God really could take the lemons of our life and make lemonade. And in fact, the act of sharing my story, of declaring how he'd worked in my life, set in motion a whole stream of events that I never could have foreseen. At the age of 55, an age where most female presenters are being retired, I found myself being made presenter of a TV show on Christian channel TBN called Living a Transformed Life. In fact, series 2 has just gone out. And working with Authentic, I published a companion guide to the TV series and to my memoir called Sea Change, the companion guide. And the idea was it was designed to help people reflect on how God had used the circumstances of their lives to transform them, to go through the same kind of process that I had been through. And most recently, I've just launched my latest book, Soul Scribe, Connecting Your Story with God's Narrative. And Soul Scribe draws on scripture, philosophy, and psychology, as well as 20 years of reflection as a professional communicator, to explore the idea that each of us has a soul story to tell, a tale about that part of us that's born with that yearning for God, and how it looks at how God communicates with each of us throughout our lives, and how he calls and equips us to communicate that experience to others. And it invites readers to reflect on how they've experienced God throughout the different stages of their lives, posing a series of questions that build into a narrative that helps you to better understand and articulate your soul's journey. And I also provide tools to enable you to tell that story in a way that can inspire others. The emphasis of this book is on sharing your testimony informally and verbally with friends, with family, with your churches. But this course that I'm going to talk about now builds on the thinking behind this book and takes it a stage further in terms of helping you write your story for publication. Finally, I also published a children's book called Wife of the Wind, which was illustrated by my late aunt, Teresa Nicholas, the proceeds of which go to breast cancer care. And later on in this course, when I come to looking at how to get your book published, I'll be talking about my experience and the pros and cons of self-publishing versus going down the route of finding a publisher to take your manuscript. So I think it's fair to say that the whole experience of writing my story changed my life. Such was the momentum created by Sea Change 4 years ago that I actually did something fairly radical and stepped out of World Vision to focus on what seemed to be this God-given mission to declare the works of God. And I decided I'd do this in 3 ways. Firstly, as an author, I'm currently working on my 5th book called Seeking Amazing Grace, following in the footsteps of John Newton. And I've also found that writing my story has opened up a whole world of opportunities for ministry, from writing blogs and Bible plans to working with the media. The second thing I do, I also continue to work as a lay preacher in the Church of St. Peter and St. Paul in Oney. And I found a real wealth of connection between the process of writing for publication and writing sermons for congregations. And the two seem to really enrich and feed each other. And I don't know if any of you are in ministry, but you may find this as well. And like many authors, I found myself speaking at other churches, Christian groups and Christian events. And I love doing this because I meet so many people who've got these amazing stories. And this experience has really brought home to me just how many stories are out there that need to be told. Which brings me to the last area, which is my work as a consultant, which helping people to understand and articulate their Christian narrative. These are just a few of the organisations I've worked with in the last couple of years. And recently I started to work individually with Christian authors on a one-to-one basis to help them shape their narrative of their Christian stories. And I found it's something I really love doing in terms of helping other people to declare how God had been working in their lives. And it was from this work that this course was born. I want to help more people release their stories and get them out there into the world where God can do things with your words that you can never even imagine. What's become really clear to me, I think, over the last couple of years is that God doesn't bless us just for ourselves, and we're called to take his blessings and share them. And I do know that when we use our words to bless even one other person, God can take this and do quite extraordinary things. This is a very kind comment from one of the last round of people who took my course. And Emma has an amazing story to tell, but she felt really daunted by the whole process of writing. But now she's actually committed to write, and I'm working with her to help bring her story to completion. And it's such a privilege to work with people like Emma. And I think her story was going to have a real impact on others' lives. And I'm also very pleased that you found this course. So before we dive into the content of this session, I think it's really important, you'll find this throughout the course, to make sure that we're all grounded in prayer. So if you're comfortable with this, can I suggest we just take a moment to come before the Lord, and I'll just pray for us. Dear Lord and Father, we just thank you so much for this time together and for the technology that makes this possible. It's wonderful to come together in fellowship this way. And Lord, we lift up this time to you now and pray that you will open our eyes, our ears and hearts to understand the message that you want us to share with others. Each of us is going to have a unique experience of walking with you. And we pray this course will help us to appreciate the ways in which you've guided us, and that in sharing our soul stories, we may be a blessing to others, and that all that we say, write and do will be to your glory. In the name of Jesus Christ, my Lord and Saviour. Amen. Right, so let's dive in. God speaks into our lives in a myriad of ways to let us know how much he loves us, and it gives our Creator great joy when we acknowledge his love and guidance. And God doesn't give us the knowledge of his presence and experience of his love as a blessing for us alone. In fact, we're told we've got to let our light shine before others in order to glorify him and to tell how much God has done for us. So how do we do this? Well, God has given us the power of communication, the gift of words, and we're called to use those words to glorify him. The Latin vocare, which means to call, comes from the same root as vocalis, which means having or finding your voice. So we're literally called to find our voice and share his good news and what is meant for us personally. And in Revelation, we're told that they overcame the devil by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Our testimony can be truly powerful if told well. Now, the biblical concept of testimony is closely related to the idea of giving testimony in a court of law, which involves providing evidence to prove the truth of a claim. So we are witnesses to the truth that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, God from God, light from light, true God from true God. And while people can argue with your theology, they can't argue with your experience or your story. Now, there's been a lot of focus in the media over declining church attendance over the past few years, and surveys talk about how millennials in particular have lost trust in institutions, in particular the institution of the church. But there's a real opportunity to connect as the body of Christ through telling our own stories of how we came to faith, how we met Jesus, and what this meant to us. And the more authentic your witness is, the more powerfully it can impact people. I don't know about you, but I often find that Christian testimonies are often overly formulaic and overly simplified. They're just too black and white. They paint an image of a former life before Christ as unremittingly ghastly and dark and painful. And then they focus on this moment of dramatic conversion, after which life becomes this continuous stream of joy, a spiritual bed of roses. Now, these kind of testimonies are very dramatic, but they just don't relate to most people's experience. And as such, they can actually discourage people rather than encourage. People feel, well, that will never happen to me. The reality is that for most people, conversion is a gradual process, what the Apostle Paul called an anakinosis, a gradual renewing of the mind. And most people's path to God isn't necessarily a straight line. It probably looks a bit more like this. It's a journey that will involve many twists and turns, and it may include times of joy at the presence of God, but may also include times when he feels absent. It may include times of reassurance, but also times of doubt. And this is the reality that people can connect with, which is why there's such a vibrant market for Christian biographies and memoirs. Now, the most recently available figures from Nielsen show the Christian book market in the UK has been worth 101 and 183 million pounds per year. This puts the value of the Christian sector, excuse me, as somewhere between 6 and 11% of total book sales, which is pretty big. And there are a very wide range of books available through Christian book publishers, including the likes of SBCK, Hodder Faith, HarperCollins, Thomas Nelson, IVP, and my own publisher, Authentic Media. Excuse me, I'm sure it's not COVID cough. The Christian book market, of course, includes a range of different types of titles, including, of course, the Bible, the best-selling book in the world, and there are very many different translations available. But there are also many other types of books, including expository non-fiction, that which helps people to understand and deepen their faith, for example, Bible studies, theological studies, spiritual growth and ministry development books. There's devotional books such as prayer books and gift books, and Christian fiction. Now, this is a growing market, although I would say it's one that's very challenging because it competes with the very dynamic secular book market. And of course, narrative non-fiction. That is, books which tell a story which is true in the form of autobiography, memoir, or biography. And this course is focused on this specific part of the non-fiction market, narrative non-fiction, and specifically Christian autobiographies or memoirs. Your story as a Christian. So what do we actually mean by an autobiography or memoir? I think it's quite important to understand this. Traditionally, an autobiography tells your story chronologically, and it covers the whole of your lifespan to date, and is primarily concerned with establishing historical fact. A memoir, on the other hand, has a more specific timeline, and it often focuses on a part of your life and is really about conveying an emotional truth. It provides an intimate insight into the author's worldview. And in many ways, I believe that an account of a Christian life needs to be a melding of these two. There's something totally immersive about a book that cannot be replicated in any other form of communication. The written word relies so much upon the reader's imagination, and it offers opportunity for the reader to internalize and make your story their own. And this is so powerful when you're looking at an autobiography or memoir, where the author's inviting the reader into their own consciousness to identify with their experiences. And this is incredibly powerful when you're writing about your faith journey. And as such, your book needs to both convey the profound emotional truth of your experience with God, but also needs to be rooted in the very real details of your life, which give your story that ring of authenticity. When it comes to timescales, in many ways, this will be dictated by your journey of faith as a Christian. If you only came to faith later in life, for example, you may want to begin your story at this point of awakening and not necessarily go into great detail about your earlier years. Basically, you can set the timeline that works for you. But before we start thinking about any of this, we need to really spend some time thinking about someone else, which is what I really want to focus on today, and that's your reader. Now, unless you're writing your book for an audience of one, i.e. yourself, this whole process has to begin with thinking about your reader. All good communications begin with understanding your audience. Jesus Christ was probably the greatest communicator the world has ever known, and his words ring down through the centuries and have transformed the world. In fact, I can't remember who said this originally, but it's been said that for 2,000 years, he has had a greater effect on the whole world than all the kings, rulers, emperors, scientists, and philosophers who ever lived, all put together. And one of the great characteristics of Christ's communication was that it was always audience specific. He was incredibly attentive to people. He was even attentive enough to spot the outliers. Bartimaeus, Zacharias, the suffering woman in the crowd who'd reached out to touch his cloak. And his communications were always guided by the insights born of that attentiveness. He really knew his audience. And if you were to effectively share your experience of Jesus, you need to know who your reader is and to write for them. Now, at this stage, I quite often have people thinking, well, but my book's for everyone. I want to write a book for everyone. I'll give you a warning here. There's an old adage that says, if you market to everyone, you sell to no one. And one of the things that's most likely to guarantee that your manuscript ends up in the publisher's recycling bin is a proposal that says, this is a book for everyone. And that applies just as much to the Christian market as it does to any other for very, very practical reasons. The problem with targeting a very wide audience is that, first of all, you're competing with a lot of other authors, and the number of authors is only increasing. UNESCO estimates that around 2.2 million new books are published every year, and that's growing, particularly because of self-publishing. With the success of platforms like Amazon Kindle Direct, the number of self-published books has grown by about 40% over the last couple of years. And for publishers, the increasing number of books published each year means increased competition for readers' time and money. And as the competition continues to grow, the effort it will take to convince readers that your book is the one that they should spend their money on will continue to become more difficult. And reaching an audience, a wide audience, costs an awful lot of money in terms of marketing. It requires significant advertising spend and promotion across mass market channels. And when a publisher looks at a book proposal, they aren't only concerned with the quality of your manuscript and your story. They want to know how easy it will be to market and sell your book and to recoup their return on investment. And a big marketing spend means they will expect you to sell an awful lot of books. And unless you're J.K. Rowling, the average sale for a first-time author will be around 2,000 copies for a first print run. And it's really important to recognise this, particularly if you're thinking about going down a self-publishing route. There are always outliers like 50 Shades of Grey, but in general, it's unlikely that you'll have the time or money to invest in mass marketing on the scale required to sell your books. The whole business of reaching your audience is also being complicated by the move from bricks to clicks. I feel quite sad about this, but once upon a time, Christian bookshops were really one of the bastions of frontline ministry. People would go into bookshops and in browsing, find books that would help them in their faith journey. They may not even be Christians, they may be seekers. But sadly, of course, many Christian bookshops are closing down, and it's likely to be made worse by COVID-19 and this lockdown. And as book sales shift online to outlets like eden.co.uk, Aslan Christian Books and the American Christianbooks.com, it becomes much harder for people to actually browse for books. Instead, customers tend to go shopping with a clear idea of what they're looking for in terms of title, author, and genre. So success in this environment, it depends upon knowing your audience very well and also providing a very clear hook that they can recognise. And that's something I'm going to go into detail on session 2. So the main lesson is, for a non-fiction book to be a success, you need to focus on a niche audience and their needs. So what I'm going to do now is spend a bit of time thinking about who you want to write for, who you imagine reading your words, and why they would read. So your potential readers can be differentiated in a number of ways in terms of demographics, psychographics, behaviours and geography, all of which may sound incredibly complicated, but when publishers think about readers, they think in these terms. So you need to understand this and to do so as well. And don't worry, it's really not as hard as it sounds. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to have a look at your reader. And as we go through this, you may want to take some notes of any thoughts that come to mind. But you will also have access to this presentation afterwards, a recording of this on the website. But if you've got a notepad, now's the time to take it out, jot down any thoughts that come to you initially. First of all, let's look at demographics. A demographic is a particular section of the population. Excuse me if any of you are marketers and I'm teaching grandmother how to suck eggs here, but some people may not be so familiar with this. So it's a particular section of the population and includes things like age, gender, occupation and family size. Now, actual hard data relating to the demographics of Christian readership is pretty hard to come by. In fact, I did a big search for this, and the most up-to-date I could find was a US Nielsen's book consumer report from 2014. But quite interesting to share anyway. According to this, 59% of Christian non-fiction buyers in the US are female, 52% earn under $50,000, and 51% are under 45 years of age. So those are the kind of figures that publishers think about when they're assessing a book for publication. So let's have a look at how you go about identifying and understanding your readers. So first of all, what kind of age range are you looking at in terms of your readership? Do you see your book being read by people who are working age or more in retirement? Or perhaps you might be writing a book specifically targeted at young adults, which is a particular segment. So think about what age. You will have an opportunity to do this work afterwards, so don't worry if you can't get it all down now. Secondly, it's worthwhile thinking about gender. Your book may appeal to both genders, many autobiographies do, but the question to ask yourself is there something in there that will make it appeal more to one gender than another? My book Sea Change, for example, talked about my struggle with breast cancer, and so there was an obvious appeal to women, although it has sold to a lot of men as well. So think about, is there some aspect of your story that's going to have specific gender appeal, a hook for specific genders? Also think about occupations. You don't have to get too detailed here, but it's worth thinking about things like potential income levels, because this will affect your readers' book buying habits. There are always exceptions, but generally those with higher income levels are more likely to buy books and also be more willing to try out unknown authors. Whereas those with lower income levels may only buy a book if it's by a well-known author or obviously seems to meet a deeply felt need. And this impacts how you approach telling your story, whether it's focused more on telling the details of your journey, or whether you're going to be more overt about the lessons you've learnt on that journey so they can help others. So think about what kind of occupations you imagine your readers being in. And I would say, think really broad brush, think white collar office workers, professions such as lawyers, doctors, maybe caring professions such as nurses, or more hands-on blue collar roles. So just get a broad brush idea of the kind of occupations that your readers likely to be in, because that also will be of relevance. And what's their family situation? Are they, for example, likely to have young families or to be retired with grandchildren? Or are they millennial singles? All this is really important for how they're going to relate to you and to your story. The second area to look at is what we call psychographics, which is another way of thinking about audiences generally used by marketing. And it looks beyond demographics to how people actually think about things. So the kind of things that we need to think about here are readers' attitudes and opinions. This is about how they look at the world, and it's a really vast category, and it can encompass so many areas. But classically, it includes things like their political beliefs, whether they come at the world from a more socialist or conservative perspective, whether they are more nationally and domestically focused, or whether they have more of a global worldview. But it also includes areas such as their views on environmentalism or on issues around sexuality, all of which is going to influence the kind of books that they're going to be interested in. And critically, this includes how they think about faith. You need to think about whether you're targeting your book primarily at Christians or at those of any faith, and also whether there's any denominational bias. Now, your aim may be to write a truly ecumenical book, and that's fine. That was exactly what I set out to do. But I was aware that my background, initially as a Baptist and later as an Anglican, would influence how I would write, and consequently how my writing would connect with and appeal to others. So have a think about your own denominational background as well, and who might be able to best connect with your experiences. Secondly, what are their education levels? I've included this in here because knowing people's educational background helps to understand how they might consume information. Those who are more widely read might appreciate a more literary approach and literary references, whereas those who've spent less time focused on formal education may appreciate a more practical and down-to-earth approach. There are always exceptions to this, of course, but this is just intended to give you a bit of a guide. So we then come on to thinking about behaviours. What, for example, are your readers' church-going habits? Are you targeting your book at mature Christians who have a long and deep relationship with the church? At younger Christians who may just be setting out in faith? Or occasional Christians who just turn up at Christmas and Easter? Or are you trying to reach out to seekers to go beyond that? This is really important because it really affects your tone. I'd say at the outset, you always need to avoid using Christian jargon. But if you're talking to a more mature Christian audience, you can assume a greater understanding of concepts such as salvation and redemption, which to a seeker or an audience who are less regular churchgoers may seem a bit alien. So you need to think, what are your readers' church-going habits, and what does that mean in terms of their understanding? And what do they do when they aren't at church or at work? What do they do with their leisure time? Now, it's really worth thinking this through, because it's often through this aspect of a reader's lives that you can reach a broader audience, what in marketing is called the long tail. For example, I realised I'd spent so much of my life travelling that this might well appeal to other travellers, both real and armchair. So in Sea Changed, I really focused on how I experienced God as I discovered different parts of the world in order to reach out to this audience. So think about what kind of leisure pursuits do you think your readers would go in for? You know, are they into adrenaline-fueled pursuits such as paragliding or hiking in the great outdoors? Or are they more indoor types who like stamp collecting and jigsaws? You get the idea. It's just what you're thinking about is, what are the points of connection in terms of your own experiences and your own life experiences and their particular interests? And finally, reading. Now, we're taking it as a given that your audience reads, but what do they read? What other authors are they reading? What other types of books would be on their bookshelves? This is really important to think about, and I suggest that you spend some time on this and make a list of the kind of books they'd be reading, and then go and buy or borrow a few books on the list. and read them, because they will help you to get inside the head of your potential reader. And then finally, geographic. Where are your readers located? What continent are they based in? And don't just say worldwide, although that is every publisher's hope when they take on an author. But you need to think, is your book primarily focused, for example, on a UK audience? Are you hoping to break into other English-speaking markets, such as America or Australia? That very much affects the language that you use, whether you use very much UK English or whether you use more globalized English. And are there aspects of your book that will appeal to people in a particular area? I knew, for example, that my book, Sea Change, would appeal to people in Australia, as part of my book is based in that country. But I also knew that I'd have buyers closer to home in North Buckinghamshire, where I now live, because they've enjoyed reading sections about that area. So I suggest you think this through in terms of continent, country, and local areas. Now, I know I've gone through that quite fast, but to help you think this through, I'm going to be providing you with a template with all this information in. During each stage of the course, what I do is provide you with templates to help you to think through everything from understanding your readers to structuring your story arc. And I make these available in a private Facebook group, which you have access to when you sign up for the full course. But for this taster session, I'm going to be making these templates available today on my website at katenicholas.co.uk, My Soul Story Full Course. If you look in the chat, you'll see the link there, which has all the templates, but I will send out the link afterwards as well to you. So that's doing some work in terms of segmenting and really understanding your readers. But what I really also encourage you to do is to develop an avatar or a persona, which is a composite of all the readers that you're thinking about. When I go into the studio to record my TV show, I do it without an audience, just a camera. So as I speak into the camera, I try to imagine that I'm speaking to one single viewer, who they are, where they are, how they might be feeling today, what their concerns, what their needs are. And a persona is a writer's equivalent of this, an author's equivalent of this. And when you write, you always need to keep this audience in mind. One of the best ways to do this is to come up with a persona. So once again, I'm going to provide you with a template to help you do this. And in order to create a persona, we need to think about some of the things that you've just gone through. So, for example, what is their age? What is their gender, occupation and family size? Their attitudes and opinions, including their denomination and education, their church and leisure habits and what else they're reading, and where they live. But to create a persona, you also need to think about their hopes and dreams, the challenges they face in life, and what actually keeps them awake at night, and what problem they're looking to solve, and what their deep felt needs are that they're trying to fill. For example, they might be struggling with teenagers, with marriage or something else, and they might be looking to see how other Christians have dealt with this problem. Or they may be wondering where God is in the face of adversity and needing assurance that he meets us in our suffering through your stories. So you need to think about what their needs might be, and then consider what they might be looking for in a book. Are they looking for inspirational examples of faith? Are they looking for guidance? Or are they looking for reflection, for example? And once you've done all this, and I say again, you'll have a template to do this, I suggest you give them a name. And what I do is I also find a picture, a generic picture of what they might look like. And I actually have up in front of me, I can't turn this around at the moment, but I've got on my board, I have my author persona with a photograph on my board. It may be that you want to come up with more than one persona, that's fine. Perhaps one male, one female, one churchgoer, one seeker. It's okay to have 2 or 3 personas, but the important point is that you can imagine them and how they think and feel, what keeps them awake at night, what their dreams are. Because it's always really important to be writing for an audience. And you'll be much more successful if you keep this person in your mind when you're writing, remembering you're writing for them. As I say, one idea I would say is once you've done the template and you've appended a photograph to it, put this up in front of you when you write. And I'm actually going to come on to writing spaces further on the course in the next session. So I've given you a lot of homework to do. First of all, you're going to look at focusing on your key audiences by looking at demographics, psychographics, behavior, and geography. And secondly, you're going to come up with one or more named personas that you can keep in mind when you're writing. And this, I can't emphasize enough, this is really important foundational work to do. And we'll use it when we do the critical work of defining your offer or your central theme. That's the golden thread that runs throughout your story, which helps to draw together all the salient parts of your journey to create something that's truly inspirational and transformative. And it's this offer or theme that helps you to actually structure and shape your story and to be able to sell your book to potential publishers and to readers. So what I've done so far today really is help you, I think, to packing the necessary resources into your backpack is the best way to think of it. Packing the resources into your backpack for the journey ahead. But you also need to have a very clear vision of where you're heading to, a good roadmap to guide you, and the various other tools in order to write a truly compelling autobiography or memoir. And my aim is to equip you with all these things through my online course. So over the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be offering free 90-minute live Zoom sessions. And in session 2, we're going to look at the discipline of writing, excluding how long you can expect to take to write a book, as well as useful tools for authors. We'll take the work that you've done on understanding your readers and use this to help clearly define your offer to your readers and publishers. And we'll also begin looking at how you can use literary techniques more commonly used in fiction to help you to create a real life page turner. And that includes the art of storytelling and structures that can be used to develop your plot and story arc. In the third session, we look at the next stage of structuring your autobiography, including plot points, as well as storyboarding, looking at how you can look at your story in terms of dramatic units, creating suspense from the first page. We also look at how to really immerse your readers in your story, including how to develop key characters in your story. And yes, an autobiography does have characters, and the art of writing convincing dialogue. And we also begin to look at some of the elements you need to think about as you prepare to send your book to publishers for consideration. And that includes front matter, including introductions and prologues, and end matter, including endnotes. And then in the final session, we look at the art of editing, including reviewing guidelines and some specifics to Christian writing. We'll also look at some legal issues, as well as style guides. And I then come on to the business of getting your book published, including how to find publishers and literary agents, and what both are looking for in a book, with guidelines of how to submit your manuscript. And if you get that far, it's a real achievement, but this is when the hard work of promoting your book actually begins. So we also touch on some of the basics of book promotion. And as part of this course, you'll have access to a private Facebook group where you can connect with each other, and access all of the material shared and ask questions, interact. You'll also have the downloadable templates to help you with refining your book structure, plotting your story, character development, and a whole raft of other things. Now, the sessions take place at 7 p.m. on a Monday, starting on March the 8th, next week, 3 weeks. And each session will be live on Zoom with plenty of time for questions and interaction. And the recordings will be available to access at any time on our private Facebook group. The cost of this course is £450, but I'm currently offering the full course at a heavily discounted rate of £145. And in addition, I'm making available 5 limited office gold packages, which include me reviewing templates and actually providing recommendations as you complete them as part of the course. In addition, you'll also have the option to take up a special offer on additional one-to-one support package, which includes one-to-one Zoom session plotting your story arc and storyboarding, and also the opportunity to have your final manuscript reviewed by a leading Christian publisher. Now, for many people, they find this kind of one of the biggest hurdles in terms of writing a book. It's one of the most daunting things is actually how to get through to a publisher. But as part of this support package, your book will be read by the editing team of a leading Christian publisher, and you receive a reader's report highlighting areas of consideration, including strengths and weaknesses to assist in rewriting. And once you've taken that report, received it, and actioned any recommendations, you're then invited to submit your work to be reviewed for potential publication. Now, obviously, I can't guarantee you'll get a contract, but it is an amazing opportunity and a route into a major Christian publisher who actually specializes in autobiographies and memoirs. So all you have to do to take part in the course and to access this additional support package is to go to my website. Again, here is the link. The link is in the chat, and I'll also be making this available through an email of this session. And when you go to the site, you'll be able to access the templates from today's session and a recording of session 1. Finally, this is something you're going to get used to. My publisher wouldn't let me get away without telling you this. My new book, Soul Scribe, is available at Christian bookstores and at Eden, Aslan, Amazon and Waterstones online, as well as through my website. And I'm also, for a limited period following the launch, I'm doing signed copies of my book. And you can get signed copies of Soul Scribe by going to bit.ly/get Kate's books. Again, I'm going to put that link in the chat and I'll send out after the session. I also want to let you know about a special offer from Aslan Christian Books, who are very kindly supporting this course by offering discounts on my best-selling memoir, Sea Change, and the accompanying reflection guide, Living a Transformed Life. So usually Sea Change is $9.99, they're offering it for $6.99, and the reflection guide, $5.99 instead of $7.99. So to take advantage of that, you just go to my homepage on my website and it's available there. So again, I'm putting all the links in the chat, and I'll send an email to you after the course. So at this stage, I'm going to stop for questions. So if you want to unmute yourself, if you have any questions, I'm actually going to put something in the chat, to put the link in the chat. So if you get any questions, any thoughts that strike you.
I just wondered whether you have all the dates for the course, because the dates you've given, the dates are not convenient to me because I'm quite busy at the moment. I'm preparing for exams. So maybe sometime May. Are you running the course in May or, later in the year?
I'll be running it again in end of June, beginning of July.
Okay, that's brilliant.
Yeah. So I can let you know the details of that when it comes up. So I've decided to run it 3 times a year. So I'll run it at the end of the last week in June, beginning of July. I'm running into July, and then I'll run it again in October. So
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Okay. So will you still send out the details and the templates and all those things?
Of course, yes. No, I'll be sending out an email after the session. I'm going to send it out through MailChimp. What I would suggest you do, though, please do check. Sometimes MailChimp, unfortunately, goes to spam folders or junk mail. Please do check. If you haven't received the email with the link to the templates, you've all got my email address. Just ping me an email and I'll send it through my personal email.
Okay.
I'll send it on to you. So just if you haven't received it, it won't be till tomorrow morning, because I now have to go away and have to go and edit and trim down this this video, upload it to YouTube, all of which takes a bit of time, and I'll have it on my website by tomorrow morning. So as soon as I've got it on my website, if you haven't received something by about midday tomorrow, just ping me an email.
Yeah. The reason why I ask is because I also want to continue a bit later, because coming Friday I will go in for quite a big operation. So
God bless you.
I will be out for some time.
Oh my dear. Oh my dear. Well, no, yes, absolutely fine. Well, get the templates. What I suggest you do is you can also start doing some work gently on the audience piece, so then you'll have that there. Have a think about it, just have a prayer and reflect about it. And that'll give you that information then. So if you then want to start the course later on, and you just always do this taster as a refresher again,
Yeah.
Do it as a refresher again. But it's worthwhile taking, if you've got a bit of time, take that time to think about your audience.
All right.
One thing I will say is, I make this very clear when I start the course, the next session of the course, is I do not expect everyone to finish all of the elements that I'm going to provide you with in 4 weeks. Nobody expects you to do that. The reason I do it in 4 weeks is that when I went through this process, I kept on discovering things along the way and having to go back and rewrite. And I actually realized I wished I'd known all this stuff when I set out, because I'd have written my book differently. So I decided the best way to do this was to provide you with everything up front. And then you've got it all, and you can understand the full landscape. And it really helps you then to not have to keep on doing an awful lot of revisions if you've actually got the kind of all the information up front. It was a painful journey. I rewrote mine multiple times as I kept finding out more about the whole process. So that's why but certainly you don't have to do everything up front. And once you've done the course, I'm available to talk and things. I don't disappear after 4 weeks. I'm available then to talk into, questions, any kind of help. It's just that I want to equip you up front, because I wish somebody had done that with me.
I don't have Facebook. Is that going to be a problem for sort of resources and things?
No, I'll send if you can't get on Facebook, it's nice to be on Facebook because you interact with each other. But I can send out an email after every session with all the details, with the templates, with PDF and recording. I don't necessarily always, I can record every single one. So recording, what I said is templates, recording, and a PDF of the actual PowerPoint.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, I just emailed them to you afterwards if you're not on Facebook.
Kate, does the support package include the gold package, or is it just on its own?
No, the gold package normally comes a bit earlier. The support package tends to be used a little bit later on, to be honest. The gold package is it's like about £50, £60 extra. And basically, as you do the templates, I then review them and give recommendations as you're doing them. But then once you've got all those, that's when you move on to the next stage. And I do a Zoom session whereby if you do the support package, I then do a one-on-one Zoom session to help you actually storyboard in detail. Okay,
so there are two different products.
Two different things. Yeah, two different things. Yeah.
So
two different phases of it.
So you either go with the Write Your Soul Story and support, or gold package and support if you want to. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So you can either do the £145 one, which is the base, which is just the store course, which in itself is great, and people found that really valuable. You can do that plus the support package if you decide to take that later on. You could do the gold package plus the support package, or you could just do the course. And I think people find as they go through it, I think the process of doing the templates things helps people understand whether they want that one-to-one support or not. Of course, you have to, in order to get the reader's report and get the access to the publisher, you do have to buy the support package.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
That doesn't come as part of this, because that's taken a lot of negotiation getting that. So that's quite a big deal. So yeah, that comes with the support package.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yeah. But partly what I will say is that if someone feels, I think as you get into it, you'll see what you might want. I'm saying certainly the gold package, a lot of people have found that very, very useful, because at each stage I could have review, give comments, give recommendations, and we get a bit more interaction to and fro in detail on the templates,
Yeah.
What I do is I say I only do 5 of those, because I do put quite a lot of work into it. So there's a limit to how many I can do, So I basically say, I do take it very seriously. So I don't offer millions of those. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to give it the attention I wanted to give to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So how we doing? I don't know how we're doing time. How are we doing time-wise? Let me see how we're doing time-wise. It's got, we're nearly there. So any other questions at all before I kind of call it a day?
No, just thanks very much.
Good.
It's already been fascinating, really interesting.
Thank you, Kate, very, very much.
I'm so glad. Well, it's been just great to get this back on slide. It's been so great to have you on the call. It's lovely to meet you. I really hope you feel inspired and encouraged and fired up to do something now. It's I can't tell you, the whole experience of doing an autobiography I found life-changing in so many different ways, and I think it's a wonderful thing to do spiritually as well as creatively. So I really hope you feel inspired. I'm going to send all out the links, say the links, if you haven't got them by midday tomorrow, ping me. And I really hope to see somebody at the next course session on March the 8th, and if not, afterwards in July. And the next course session, if you do join me, we'll be looking at how to structure a real page turner. We'll get into the business of structuring your story. But until then, go in peace and love of God.
God bless
Thank you.
God bless you.
God
Thank
bless
you
you.
very much.
God bless you.
Bye.
Lovely to meet you all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
Lovely
you.
to meet you all.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.